Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We have spent nearly a year looking for a Russian scandal. For months, it's been basically the only thing anyone in Washington talked about. Many people were certain it would end in impeachment and prison terms.
I've come to conclude that Trump has the Kremlin clan surrounding him. There's more to be learned about it. I believe there's been collusion.
It's starting to smell more and more like collusion to, I think, the public.
We saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude possibly with Russia.
Well, it's finally happened. We have a Russia scandal, but instead of proving collusion between the Trump campaign and the government of Vladimir Putin, this one reveals deep wrongdoing in the Obama administration, and it's real. We've known for several years that Russian money was flowing to the Clinton family and the foundations during the exact same period the Obama administration approved the Russian acquisition of 20% of this country's strategic uranium reserves. But now, new reporting from the Hill newspaper reveals that as early as 2009, the FBI was investigating secret Russian efforts to get the deal done by bribing Americans. And yet somehow the public and even key officials were never told about that investigation as they made the decision to allow the deal to go forward. At least one American businessman says he directly witnessed Russian efforts to convince the Clintons to approve that deal. The businessman says he was blocked from publicly telling Congress what he knew because he was ordered to remain silent by Eric Holder's Justice Department. It's a remarkable story and potentially a very significant one. Peter Schweitzer originally broke this story in a book called Clinton Cash. He's been covering it ever since, and he joins us now. Peter, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Doctor. Thanks for having me.
So this is a kind of confusing coda to the story. The person who apparently has firsthand evidence that the Russian government tried to suborn the Clintons to get them to support the deal has been prevented from speaking even to Congress. How can that be, and what's the justification for that?
Well, that's a great question, Tucker. What we know apparently, based on the reporting, is that he has been put under a gag order by the Department of Justice and has been told that if he speaks about this publicly, not only will he face financial penalties in the form of a fine, that he could actually go to jail, that his liberty would be at risk, which is mystifying to me. I mean, why do we not want to know the details about this? That's what's so troubling, is it reeks of cover-up. It just stinks. There's no other word for it.
As a legal matter, how can the Justice Department from a previous administration tell the Congress of the United States, elected officials, that they can't talk to an American citizen about allegations of bribery that put our national security at risk? How does that work?
Well, it really shouldn't work and can't work. And what I mean is the Department of Justice today, under President Trump, Attorney General Sessions, could tomorrow come back and say we are removing this gag order, that we believe that there's a compelling national interest to know. We want this individual to testify before Congress. We want the public to know exactly what went on. So this is not something that's unbreakable, but it just simply takes a request from the Department of Justice to remove that gag order. If that gag order is not removed, I think it's doubtful this businessman's going to want to go public because he doesn't want to be put in legal jeopardy.
So back to the core question, the approval of this deal, Uranium One, purchased by a Russian company, giving the Russians, in effect, control of 20% of our uranium supply. The office of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said basically she had nothing to do with the approval.
Right.
Is that
right.
True? How could that be true?
It's not true, and it's interesting with the Podesta emails that came out, the leaked Podesta emails, what you find is how they tried to cover this up. One of the assistant secretaries, a gentleman named Fernandez, came forward and said, oh, I was the one that really made the decision. She was not involved in that decision. But if you look in the Podesta emails, you see exactly how it went down. Fernandez is communicating with John Podesta and is saying, let me know what I can say, how I can be helpful. So she was intimately involved in this decision. And this is the important thing to keep in mind, Tucker. Hillary Clinton, in 2008, when she ran for president, went into detail. She actually had a plan on toughening CFIUS, this body that would approve these kind of controversial deals. So she's very knowledgeable on this subject, and she's a hawk on this issue. So for her to pretend like, well, I don't really know what was going on, I was not involved, just stretches credulity, and that's one of the reasons we need to have an investigation. And really, to this point, Tucker, we have not had a congressional hearing on this. We've not had a grand jury as far as we know. It's just shocking to me that there's been no investigation on this whatsoever.
Just to be clear, the dots that we're connecting are not very far apart. So the chairman of this uranium company, Uranium One, is also on the board of the Clinton Foundation and a close friend of the Clintons. John Podesta's company, the Podesta Group, lobbied on behalf of this company, Uranium One. Am I getting these facts wrong?
You're exactly right, Tucker. Here's the bottom line. As this deal was coming for approval in 2010, the Clinton Foundation received from 9 shareholders in this uranium company that was sold to the Russians. 9 of them all of a sudden decided they were going to donate large amounts of money to the Clinton Foundation, more than $145 million. And by the way, a lot of those donations were never declared publicly by the Clintons. They were hidden. So it stinks in so many levels. Here's the other important national security implication, Tucker. This deal was predicated on the fact that when the Russians got control of this uranium, it would not be exported out of the United States. That was part of the agreement. The New York Times has now reported that that's not true. Yellow cake from these uranium mines are being exported out of the United States, and we don't even really know where they're going. That in and of itself demands investigation.
Yeah, about 20% of it, they've reported, has gone to some unknown destination, which is ominous. Peter Schweitzer, again, the person who broke this story in the beginning and has been on it ever since. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
So questions of bribery aside, why exactly did the Obama administration allow a foreign rival, Russia, to control 20% of American uranium reserves? Nancy Soderberg was an ambassador to the United Nations and Deputy National Security Advisor at the White House under President Clinton, and she joins us tonight. Ambassador, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
So leaving aside the questions of the DOJ investigation, why in the world would Hillary Clinton's State Department and the Obama administration sign off on a deal that allows a rival power to control 20% of our uranium reserves?
Well, these business deals are ones that had review of 9 different agencies, and they agreed that since it was going to stay in the country, that it would be an acceptable way to keep our uranium safe here and under appropriate controls. And I think that the reporter that it's been gone and yellow cake has been really disproven. And Tucker, I really think you're digging at the bottom of the barrel here.
May I just stop you there? So you think it was a good idea for the Obama administration to give Russia, our primary adversary in the world, according to the Democrats, control of 20% of our uranium? Why would that be a good idea? I'm sincere. Why is that a good idea?
I'm not familiar with the details of this particular uranium deal, but we have trade in uranium with appropriate controls throughout the last 40 years, bipartisan. Both Republican and Democrat governments feel that we can keep the appropriate controls on. The bigger issue here is this whole issue is fake news in terms of an investigation. It's been shut. In fact, all President Trump has to do is ask his current Deputy Attorney General and Deputy Head of the FBI, who looked at this and closed it in 2015. So this is fake news trying to divert from what is the issue.
I'm actually not engaging in fake. Okay, you may have that view, but I'm not engaging in that. I'm asking you about the policies.
Why are we talking about something that happened almost 10 years ago?
I'll tell you. Actually, I can answer it. Hold on. This isn't what stopped. It didn't happen almost 10 years ago.
Invading in our own democracy here. We should be talking about that.
If we are as concerned about Russia as you say we should be, as you just said we ought to be, then why wouldn't we be concerned about the fact that, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, reported in the New York Times, some large percentage of this uranium in the form of yellow cake has been exported to unknown countries? What countries do you think those are? Switzerland?
I have no idea. And
okay, but why? Wait, but hold on. Wait, why isn't that?
I'm not in the government right now, so I'm not looking
hold
at
on. But you have
the
no
security
problem.
piece of this.
Okay, but hold on. You've got no problem saying they hacked our democracy. Why aren't you concerned about that? You blow past it like it's.
Look, what I'm more concerned about right now, I'm concerned about any breach of our national security, and if there's a problem here, we need to investigate it and look at it, and that's what both presidents, Democrat and Republican, do. What I'm more concerned about is the invasion of our democracy by that very power you're trying to go back 10 years ago. What did the Russians do in our investigation right now, and why are
But it's
the
not
GOP,
10 years ago. We're not talking about Facebook ads they bought. We're talking.
No, what I want to know, and what your show should be talking
You're
about, is
filibustering. Actually, an important point.
Why are the Republicans in this Congress trying to cut off the investigation of Russia's role in our democracy? That's real news.
But by the way, I'm not. You know what? I'll grant you that point. I don't care. I want to talk about the fact that uranium is being mined in the American West and is controlled by the Russian government, the very one that you say poses a threat to our democracy. Why shouldn't every American sit bolt upright and say, what? How the hell did they get control of that? No, I'm serious. It's not 10 years ago. It's right now. It's happening now.
Well, first of all, I don't think they control the uranium. It's under very tight controls. It's under very security controls.
But it's not
My
under
understanding
tight
is
controls.
they own some of
the U.S. government.
They own some of the company that owns it. And if it's a problem, then we need to have the president look into that. He's in charge right now, and President Trump should look into it.
Would you have signed off on that deal? Honestly, knowing what you know about Russia, you don't think it's just prima facie insane to give a country that seeks our destruction control of our uranium supply?
This is a deal that was almost 10 years ago.
It's
I'm not going to
almost
sit
10
here and
years
tell you
ago.
about the
No,
deal.
that's
It
not
was
true.
2010.
Okay.
It's almost 2018.
But it is ongoing to this day.
I think, look,
and Bill Clinton brokered it. You don't think?
Look, we have.
No, but that's not
very
speculation.
strong,
That's a fact.
All of us take very seriously the control of uranium, plutonium,
You don't seem
and
to.
our stockpiles. Oh, absolutely, I do.
Oh, really? Then why are you blowing past my questions, which are real?
I've said several times, these types of deals, and I'm not familiar with this particular one, have very, very tight controls. They're reviewed by 9 agencies.
But you are factually wrong in this case because we don't know where the yellow cake is going. That's been reported by the New York Times. It's not something I'm making up in right-wing land. That's a real thing. So why aren't you upset about it?
Because I haven't seen that report, and from what I know, these have very tight controls on them, and if there's a problem, then the Trump administration needs to immediately look at it.
I agree.
What I'm concerned about is Congress doing Russia's bidding by trying to stop the investigation of Russia's collusion in our elections.
But this is
Why
silly.
are we doing
They're not.
that?
We have an independent council investigation that's proceeding
and the
at pace that has
Congress
unlimited. But they can't stop it.
Why are the Republicans in Congress trying to do Russia's bidding and stop the investigation?
I'm a little surprised that you are resorting to political bumper stickers and talking points, and I'm asking you about a policy that affects our national security
right now. No, you're trying to dig back in history to deflect from what's going on in today's history.
It's ongoing. It's happening right now.
And what's happening right now
You're the former ambassador. Why am I the policy person in this conversation? I don't care what the Republicans do.
I've said we need to address the security of this deal that was almost 10 years old, and we will. And the President of the United States has the power to do that. What I'm concerned about is what's happening today in Russia's interference in our elections.
This is happening today. They have control right now.
And why are the Republicans in Congress trying to cut that?
Whatever. They have no control. It's an independent counsel investigation. They can't stop it.
They're trying to cut the funding off of that investigation.
So you're worried about Facebook ads, and I'm worried about the dissemination of yellow cake. I'll let our viewers decide which is more important.
The American people need to know what happened in our election.
Right, okay.
And that's the bottom line.
All right, Ambassador, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. The Hollywood backlash against sexual harassment has claimed a new head, this time at Amazon Pictures. We'll get details on that next. Colin Kaepernick became an icon on the left for voicing his political views, and now, irony of ironies, he's going after the NFL owners for expressing their own political views. Kaepernick started the trend of kneeling for the anthem. He hasn't been signed by a team in the NFL this year. He says that's because the team owners, have colluded to keep him blackballed from the league. He's now suing the NFL. Does he have a case? Judge Jeanine Pirro hosts Justice with Judge Jeanine, Saturdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. You already watch it, but you should keep doing so, and she joins us now. So, Judge, this opens up a whole new vista of possibilities. I'd love to be in the NFL. Can I sue because they haven't hired me?
Look, Colin Kaepernick has a right to his opinion, but he doesn't have the right to be in the NFL. This guy is a crybaby. He's claiming he's a victim. He's claiming that there's collusion in the NFL. Now think about this, Tucker. What he has to prove in this collective bargaining claim of collusion and conspiracy is that several teams in the NFL or the NFL officials and at least one team got together and said, we're going to prevent this great football quarterback from being in the NFL because of his political views. I got a news for you. They can keep you out of the NFL for whatever reason they want. They can decide they don't like you and keep you out of the NFL. You don't have a right to be in the NFL. But he's got to prove by a clear preponderance of the evidence, with evidence, that they colluded. What evidence does he have of collusion? Right now, he's saying that there was a political atmosphere, that the president was partisan in this. Colin Kaepernick needs to understand, he took a knee in, what was it, August of 2016, when the president had not even mentioned this, and he became a free agent in March of this year. The president didn't talk about any of this until last month. So he's saying, I'm a victim of the president and all this political partisanship. The president didn't open his mouth until a month ago.
But also, I mean, isn't it, the claim itself is just ludicrous on common sense grounds. Character is clearly not an important criterion in the NFL. They hire horrible people all the time on the basis of, really, I mean, they hire, it's a pure meritocracy. They hire the best football players. Like, they've got a long history of that, right?
Yeah, have you looked at the rap sheets of any of these guys? The proportion of the guys who have been arrested? I'm not even going to go into it, but make no mistake, what with domestic violence, some of the claims that we've heard about manslaughter, et cetera, et cetera. But what you've got with Colin Kaepernick is a guy who, sure, he helped the 49ers get to the Super Bowl, but he was benched 2015 for the whole year. So don't say, because you decide you want to be a free agent and get out of your contract, now all of a sudden you have more rights than everyone else. You don't. And I don't care who your lawyer is. I don't care if this seems to me to be a leftist agenda to bring Donald Trump into the issue, the president, as everything is his fault. No, it isn't, and you're not a victim. You're just not as good as you used to be.
I like the argument, though. I've got political views and no NFL contract. I wonder if there was collusion. Well, I want to ask you about this. We got another studio head brought down by sexual harassment allegations. It's Roy Price. He resigned as the head of Amazon Studios, a producer for the show The Man in the High Castle. That's one of the most popular shows on Amazon. Said that Price aggressively propositioned her for sex. According to the Hollywood Reporter, this looks something like, a little bit like, the Harvey Weinstein story. What does it add up to? Is this evidence that Weinstein is not alone?
Well, I think that it is more evidence that there is a culture in Hollywood that allows men in positions of power to try to seduce, sexually harass, sexually abuse young women, that this casting couch, aka casting bed, is something that is so much a part of business that it is not, they don't even talk about it. And I think that, look, Amazon is huge. You and I both know it's huge. And this guy is not only accused of sexual harassment. Rose McGowan went to him and said, look, I was raped by Harvey Weinstein. He poo-pooed her when under California law and federal law, you were supposed to look into those allegations. In addition to that, he then got rid of I believe it was there was some kind of project being developed by someone who had made a claim of sexual harassment. He got rid of it. This guy, Price, was very tight with Weinstein. But what we need now, Tucker, well, look, I was a prosecutor for a long time. I did sex crimes. We need to get to the bottom of this culture in Hollywood. We need to have a liaison with the National DA's Association, talk to women in New York, in LA, wherever they're doing movies, motion pictures, get the Motion Picture Association to fund it if they really mean business. Because this is going not just across the country, but across the globe in terms of the victimization of women who are young, vulnerable, and who want a career. career.
But I don't understand this. I mean, Harvey Weinstein is like a big donor to Planned Parenthood. Obviously, he supports women. You know, that's the one thing we know about Hollywood. It's an empowering place. They voted overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton. Like, how could they not be on the side of women?
This is part of the Hollywood hypocrisy where, you know, do as I say, not what I do.
Right.
And by the way, you know, Harvey Weinstein's support of women's projects and programs is nothing more than a prophylactic, so to speak, for his attempt to do what he's got to do and then say, I'm innocent, I love women. Sure do, but I love women. Look at all of these issues and all
I
of these
hired Lisa
that
Bloom.
I support.
I'm a good person. I bought my indulgences. It's like the medieval church.
Right. But that's classic Hollywood. And you know what? The fact that so many strong women, Tucker, didn't come out and say anything. They just went along with it tells me we need an outside independent agency to oversee what's going on in Hollywood.
I'm sorry to laugh. Just the ironies are so deep. Judge, it's great to see you. Judge Janine Pirro, every weekend. Thank you. You probably thought the threat of President Hillary Clinton was dead and buried, but like a zombie, it rises once again. Professor Lawrence Lessig of Harvard has a plan to reverse the election results. He joins us next to explain what it is. Now almost a year since the 2016 election. It's been 10 months since the inauguration. But the idea of a Hillary Clinton presidency refuses to die.
Oh, I hope Hillary runs. Is she going to run? I hope. Hillary, please run again. I mean, look, there are a lot of reasons she didn't win, including the fact that she was not good at what she did.
Our next guest says Hillary Clinton may not even have to run again. She may be appointed president. Harvard professor Lawrence Lessig recently wrote a piece explaining that she can still become president, Hillary can, without waiting for 2020. What exactly is this plan? Professor Larry Lessig joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So I want to take this seriously, both because you're a Harvard professor, so you're smart. I know you're a sincere person. It doesn't seem like, on its face, a very democratic plan, but how exactly could Hillary Clinton, having lost, become the president?
Well, look, I didn't write a piece predicting anything. I wrote a piece in response to a question, and the question I got was, what happens if it's shown that there was a conspiracy to steal the election? And what I said was, I'm not even sure I think I believe that. There's no evidence of that, not enough to actually speculate about it in public. But if that is true, if it's shown, then what should happen? And I think, you know, the fundamental point that if you steal the election, you have to give it back is something we all should be able to agree on. I don't know why there should be much argument about that. All I was trying to explain is what are the steps that would actually happen if this, in fact, were the first thing that happened. So, number one, if it's shown without doubt that there was a conspiracy to steal, which is different from lots of other reasons you might impeach a president. This is a very particular one. The president should resign. And if the president should resign, so too should the vice president resign. And if that happens, then under the presidential succession statute, Paul Ryan becomes president. And that's where the hard question comes. Should Ryan remain president as somebody who's inherited because of this theft, or should he do what I think is actually the moral thing to do here, which is the right thing to do, which is to correct for the theft? And he could correct for the theft very easily under the 25th Amendment by nominating a Democrat, Hillary Clinton, to be his vice president and then step aside. So it's speculation based on a question that was presented to me hundreds of, well, not hundreds of times, I'm a law professor, tens of times by people writing emails to me about it.
So I a couple of things. When you say theft, do you mean literally theft? If it could be shown that the Kremlin somehow controlled the tallies in the voting machines? Or is it theft in the sense in which it's used in Washington now, that somehow sophisticated Russian propaganda convinced a lot of right-wing mouth breathers in a couple of key states to vote against their own interests in selecting Trump? Which of those? Is it propaganda or actual theft?
No, it's actual theft. And it's not just actual theft. I mean, if you showed that the Russians actually controlled the voting booths and flipped the election, but Trump had nothing to do with it, in the sense that you can't show there was a conspiracy, I don't think there's anything that hangs on Trump. The only thing I was talking about was the extreme case, the unthinkable case, where there's an agreement, a conspiracy, working together between a foreign government and an election and a campaign to bring about the actual changing of votes, or something at that level to lead to the flipping of the election. That's the hypothetical I was trying to address.
Yeah, I mean, that's so hypothetical, though. And by the way, just for the record, if that was ever shown, I mean, I would be leading the charge against anyone who would do something like, I mean, that's totally immoral, and that would be a subversion of our
course,
democracy.
that's why I'm kind of surprised by the outrage.
Well, here's the thing. That's so unlikely that it almost seemed like you were writing a species of pornography for people who are desperate to believe that Trump's presidency is basically illegitimate, and saying to people in your own kind of propaganda, like, this could actually happen. You know what I mean? Like, you're writing escapist literature for unhappy lefties kind of thing.
Well, I'm not sure that's what I wrote, right? Because the very second paragraph of what I wrote said, I don't know if I believe it. I certainly haven't seen clear evidence of it, and I don't think it's appropriate to speculate about whether there's clear evidence of it. But I get tons of email from people asking, what if there was such a conspiracy? So, I set it up to say, I'm not saying this is true. I'm just trying to, there are a lot of people who say, well, can we have a new election? Or can the Supreme Court force the Electoral College to vote again? And what I was trying to say is, look, none of those things are possible under our Constitution. You can't have a new election. You can't have a new Electoral College vote. All of that is fixed. There's no way to go back. But there is this path, given the way the 25th Amendment works, that it could actually work. Now, again, not a prediction, not an argument for it,
I get it, but
plan.
wouldn't it just be better? I mean, it's a little like saying, I'm not saying the Israelis are behind 9/11, but just theoretically, wouldn't it just be better to say, look, using the moral authority you have as a tenured Harvard law professor, that's not true. Actually, there's literally zero evidence that the Russians got into our voting machines at any level. We've looked into this. It's not true. And, move on. Wouldn't it be better to do that?
Well, as soon as the actual ongoing investigation of what happened is finished, then yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is true. But what I started the piece by saying is that there's this chatter that's, coming up. And again, it could just be conspiracy theorists. I don't know. I don't really care. The point, again, I wasn't making a press release and coming out and trying to do some big event drawing attention to this. I was just writing a blog post in response to a question.
I know, but you're Larry Lessig. You're the famous guy. You know what I mean? People pay attention to what you're not just writing a blog post. I mean, people pay attention to what you say because you're smart and you have this position of authority. Let me ask you this final thing. Can you understand the perspective of the Trump voter looking on at this, saying, I voted for the guy, I knew his flaws, but I did it because I felt like he was better than the option. And ever since I voted for him, I've been attacked as immoral by the elites in Washington, Boston, New York, and Los Angeles, calling me immoral and trying to take the election away from me. And I'm offended by that. Can you see that perspective?
Oh my gosh, of course I can, Tucker.
Yeah.
It's not just to see the perspective. I mean, I completely understand there's a segment of the people who voted for Donald Trump who were so deeply frustrated with what they perceive to be the deeply corrupted way that Washington works. And I'm one of those people that's been on that charge, screaming this as much as I possibly can. I completely get it. And I am the first person to say I wish that all of these questions would be bracketed and put to one side, or answered at least.
Right.
But in the context of this ongoing investigation, I don't think it's to be placed on me that I'm answering a question about what could happen, something if it came out of the investigation. All I'm saying is, here's what could happen if something came out of the investigation.
Unlikely to happen. As a non-law professor, I'm gonna rule on this one. Professor, thank you for joining us.
I'm going to support you on that. It's unlikely to happen, but it's what could happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence Lessig. Up next, you pay for illegal immigrants to go to school, go to college, get food stamps, housing vouchers, and a whole lot more. Are you ready to start paying for their abortions? That's on the table somehow, all of a sudden. We'll discuss next. Well, Google has appointed itself the internet sheriff against fake news, adding to a long list of jobs like controlling your life in every way. Google says it's valiantly guarding the innocent and ignorant masses from lies that would lead them astray, lead them to do things like vote for Donald Trump. That's the idea anyway. They're still working on it. There's some bugs in the system. Earlier this week, the New York Times reported that fake news stories have persistently popped up as, believe it or not, Google-driven ads on fact-checking websites. An ad on PolitiFact said that Melania Trump was leaving the White House. Snopes had an ad for a bogus story saying Joanna Gaines was leaving her HGTV show. Whoa! Perhaps dividing fact from fiction isn't Google's strong suit after all. Well, it's well established at this point that the left believes every single person on earth has the moral right to enter this country, legally or not. But the most avant-garde liberals are finding a new right for illegal aliens, the right to have an abortion at taxpayer expense. Kristen Hawkins is president for Students for Life of America. She wrote a piece about this phenomenon for The Federalist, and she joins us tonight. Kristen, thanks for going on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So this is one of those stories, it's kind of hard to believe it's true, but you fill in the blanks. Liberals are arguing that U.S. taxpayers somehow have an obligation to fund abortions for illegal aliens. True?
That's right. This young girl entered our country illegally. She's from Central America. She informed the government once she was apprehended that she was pregnant and that she wanted to have an abortion. Not surprisingly, the ACLU seized this opportunity along with their abortion allies to mandate that taxpayers facilitate her abortion. And this is it's a shocking case because it shows you just how far the ACLU, their friends at Planned Parenthood, and the abortion industry want to take their extremist abortion agenda. They want to use this girl, and what they're trying to do is use her as sort of a Jane Roe 2.0 to internationalize Roe versus Wade, and they're declaring that she has a constitutional right to have a taxpayer-funded abortion, which the last time I checked, the Constitution only applies to Americans.
Well, and I don't think it directly addresses whether or not we have an obligation to pay for the abortions for legal aliens. I mean, it almost seems like, I mean, the left loves abortion. They think it's the key to freedom and personal liberation, as you know. But it almost seems like it's not really about abortion. It's the ACLU and affiliated groups seeing how high they can raise the middle finger in the face of middle America and say, you know what, we hate you, we despise your values, and we're going to do exactly what we want to make you pay for it, whether you like it or not.
That's right, and this is something that goes against the majority of Americans with their wishes. Majority of Americans are against taxpayer-funded abortions, and now they're just doing this again. And you know what? They actually tried to use this girl's case to add onto their additional lawsuit that they're already trying to stop Catholic Charities, which is one of the largest charities in our country, from receiving federal grants to help refugees and immigrants. So this is just their anti-life, their anti-faith agenda coming out in full force, and that's what we're seeing. And that's why, really, it's so important that we have President Trump there in D.C. We have a pro-life administration, a pro-life HHS, because they're the ones trying to protect this young girl from the ACLU, from Planned Parenthood, who are just simply using her as Jane Roe 2.0.
Boy, I mean, you wouldn't even, I mean, I am pro-life, but you wouldn't have to be in order to find this appalling. The idea that, I mean, so if some federal judge decides, in fact, the Constitution's been hiding this obligation for 225 years, would this mean that U.S. taxpayers have an obligation to fund the abortion of like anybody from around the world who comes here for one?
That's right, and this is setting up dangerous precedents. What this is going to do is going to tell any young, scared girl in Central America or anywhere else in the world, come to the United States illegally or legally, and we'll fund a taxpayer-funded abortion for you. This is some dangerous stuff, especially when you consider this young girl coming from Central America who made that dangerous, life-threatening journey to cross our borders, and this is the signal we're going to be sending out across the world.
Yeah. See, this is why Trump's going to win again. Because no matter how flawed he is, normal people look at the alternative and say, you know what? You scare me because you're nuts, actually, and you're haters.
That's right. They're extremists.
Now, that's for sure. Kristen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The disappearing Las Vegas guard is back. Jesus Campos appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres show today. But the real questions about Las Vegas remain unanswered. It's actually gotten weirder. You didn't think it was possible, but it has. We'll fill you in after the break. Well, Mandalay Bay security guard Jesus Campos, who was one of the only direct eyewitnesses to the shooting indoors in that hotel in Vegas from over 2 weeks ago, was scheduled to appear on Hannity last Thursday, but he abruptly backed out without telling anybody and disappeared. Well, today, Campos resurfaced. He made an appearance on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Here's part of it.
You just want this to be over. So you're talking about it now, and then you're not going to talk about it again. And I don't blame you, because why relive this over and over again? But it's helpful for people to understand what a hero you are, because you, being shot in the leg, saved so many people's lives. So we just wanted to celebrate you. That's why you're here today, because we want to thank you for what you've done.
Huh? How exactly does that work? And is that really an interview? Well, it turns out it could actually be a bizarre case of cross-marketing by MGM Resorts that owns Mandalay Bay, sponsors, by the way, the Ellen DeGeneres show, and features Ellen-themed slot machines in many casinos, including Mandalay Bay. Huh. Maybe that's why he did the interview. Meanwhile, MGM reached out to us after a report came out suggesting that Jesus Campos was using someone else's Social Security number. The MGM company claims they verified his employment eligibility back in 2015, and it was his Social Security card. Mark Stein is an author and columnist, and he joins us tonight. So, Mark, look, I'm not a conspiracy nut at all, and I'm desperately hoping the authorities will prevent me from forming my own conspiracies to explain what is becoming increasingly inexplicable. But it looks like that interview you just saw, and I'm putting air quotes around the word interview, was managed by MGM, and that's why they put him on Ellen's show. Does that give you confidence that the public, which has a right to understand what happened, is learning anything meaningful about this story?
No, and I'm not a conspiracy nut either, but you're entitled to be one on this, Tucker, because whether by intention or design, nothing is proceeding normally in this case, up to the absurdity where someone says, I'm only going to give one interview, and I'm going to give it to Ellen DeGeneres. And Ellen...
Exactly.
And I've got nothing against Ellen.
I don't either.
But it seems very a weird choice. And as you say, she manages to say, well, you are a true hero because by getting shot in the leg, you saved so many lives. That's not what happened. That was the old narrative.
Exactly.
The old narrative was that he interrupted the gunfire, took a shot in the leg, and brought the massacre to a halt. And then the sheriff said, oh, no, sorry, is that what I said? No, absolutely sorry, I got things the wrong way round. Actually, Mr. Campos got there before the mass shooting started, and then apparently the shooter took, between shooting Mr. Campos in the leg, there was then a 6-minute delay before he started massacring everybody, during which time he had a nice cup of tea or called down to room service or whatever he did, and then the hotel said, no, that's not what happened. There's a third timeline, and then everybody does the obvious and says, well, why don't we ask Mr. Campos what happened? And then they say suddenly, oh no, he's disappeared. He's gone now. He's off the scene. No one's seen him for a week. And then he comes back and he's on the Ellen DeGeneres show. And that's how conspiracy theories start. And everybody is entitled to take a flyer on whatever conspiracy theory they want in this case, because for whatever reason, officialdom and Mandalay Bay and the Ellen DeGeneres show have mudded the waters to total impenetrability now.
Well, that's nicely put, because it's clear. And by the way, simply because MGM managed this interview doesn't mean that it's inaccurate or that, I'm not attacking MGM, but I also think it was managed. Clearly, it was managed. Right. And so and they're under a ton of legal pressure because the usual ambulance chasers are circling the hotel looking for payouts. And so that suggests that, he's under a lot of pressure to give a specific storyline that may not be that useful in understanding what actually happened.
Well, but there's other issues here, Tucker, because Las Vegas is one of the most surveilled cities on Earth.
Yes.
Because all these big casino resort owners want to know what people are doing in the building from every conceivable angle. So even before we got the big panopticon post 9/11 security state, in Vegas they had cameras everywhere linked to some back office where everybody's looking at what you're doing. And what's interesting to me is that if, say, there's some terrorist thing that goes on in London or Paris or Brussels or wherever, within a couple of... the Brussels airport bombing is a very good thing. These guys pull some stunt at the Brussels airport, kill a bunch of people. Within 24 hours, you've got the closed-circuit television picture showing the killer moving through the airport concourse. Here, Mandalay Bay has not released any footage, any shots of this guy. The couple of pictures, even of the hotel room door, are actually extremely limited. If 200 rounds did indeed come through this door, that must be the best built hotel room door in the history of hotel rooms.
That's exactly right.
And so, obviously, I might be wrong. There might be an explanation for that. The bullet, he might not have been a very good shot, so he was actually firing through the cheap sheetrock to the side of the door. I don't know. But the fact is that Mandalay Bay has not done what Brussels Airport did in that terrorist attack.
No,
and so
it's
nobody
totally
actually
right.
knows what this guy was doing.
There's dishonesty in here somewhere. I don't know what it adds up to. Quickly, just to prove I'm not a conspiracy nut, I want to ask you about the JFK assassination. So it was 54 years ago next month, a long time ago, and we're about to get, as released by law, the final tranche of papers from the investigation into the murder. The CIA is apparently arguing those papers should be held for another 25 years, which would bring the total up to almost 80 years that they're under wrap from public view.
Right.
What could be the justification for that?
No, and again, you're entitled to be a conspiracy nut on this one too, and it makes you wonder when Donald Trump, in one of his more inventive moves, placed Ted Cruz's father on the grassy knoll that day in the late stages of the presidential primary campaign. Makes you wonder, well, it seemed a little crazy at the time, but now you look at the fact that they're trying to sit on this stuff for another, as I think we all know, Ted Cruz was born in Alberta. Was his father operating?
I'm going to have to stop you there.
On the instructions of the Canadian government? Have we got some Canadian deep sleeper operation going on here?
That was my personal favorite moment. Whole campaign. We're out of time. Unfortunately, more conspiracy. Thank you, Mark. That was great.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Up next, we'll wrap up with a discourse on fitness from CNN's poet laureate, Chris Cuomo. Stay tuned. Tonight with recently unearthed footage of one of this country's most enigmatic spiritual leaders preparing for his morning sermon. Here's the scene backstage before the start of CNN's morning show, New Day.
News time.
Mussolini in his final pose? Nope. That was noted Swami Chris Cuomo cleansing body and soul while physically inverted in the ashram known as CNN. Once again, a reminder, you don't have to understand Chris Cuomo to enjoy Chris Cuomo. Boy, do we. That's it for us tonight.